take that church away, that physical building, it takes something away from that community. Why are these churches disappearing in the first place? And the number one reason is because they're empty. People aren't coming to church anymore. Welcome to the Father Leo Show, where I'm dishing out faith, culture, and commentary. And in this episode, we're going to discuss a reaction to churches disappearing before our very eyes. It's sad, but the amount of church closures is a very palpable thing. And what are we supposed to do about it if our churches are just left abandoned, or if they're turned into, like, I don't know, a hotel or a bar? What are we supposed to do about that? But before we jump into it, please make sure you like, subscribe, share, and comment. Tell me about your experiences of your churches closing down, what it turned into, and how do you deal with it? Because we got to know it does hurt, and your engagement helps us to overcome the internet's algorithm that want to suppress basically good Catholic content. So please make sure you engage that way, and also consider supporting us on patreon.com/The Father Leo Show. You can join at any level, and if you do support us monthly, you get access to some great perks as well as some special content. So let's just jump right into it now with dealing with church closures. I actually live in a neighborhood in Little Italy in Baltimore where the church there, where I go to help out whenever I'm available, is called St. Leo the Great Catholic Church. And that was actually up on, in a sense, a chopping block because the Archdiocese of Baltimore consolidated many churches into one building, even though there were many buildings, separate buildings, up to like 3 or 4 churches are now combined into one. And that one church will be, say, the primary church. There might be a mass or two at another church, but the other churches, where are they going to go? What's going to happen to it? We know that that's happening, especially in big cities that were predominantly Catholic, and now it's waning. So I just want to show you this video because it is a little sad, but it's something that we have to consider. And how are we as Catholics supposed to deal with this issue? So in this quick little video, they just take a look at churches that were once there. Just 10 years later, they're gone. And some of these were not even Christian Catholic churches. Some of them were Protestant churches, I could see on the signs. Regardless, however, I just think that a church adds value to a community. And when you take that church away, that physical building, it takes something away from that community. So we have to ask ourselves, why are these churches disappearing in the first place? And the number one reason is because they're empty. People aren't coming to church anymore. And there are a couple reasons for that. People have either migrated out of that area. Let's just admit that once very busy cities are emptying out because of things like drugs and violence and just unfair wages and high taxes. It's really quite sad why people migrate. And many of these places were at one point neighborhood churches. Now the neighborhoods are gone, and so are the churches. The other reason it's even more sad is because people lose faith. They might still be living in that neighborhood. They just don't go to that church anymore. And that is sad. But even equally sad is that people just don't go to that church because that church is no longer relevant. It doesn't provide a service for that community. And so they get emptied out, and the building is either abandoned or the building is razed. And that's the reality. So what are we to do about it, especially in light of the fact that a lot of churches are abandoned, but it's prime property. They're just not used anymore for spiritual good. There's an article on Food and Wine magazine that talked about how many churches are being converted into bars and restaurants, and that somehow it's a good thing. And I guess it's good because hopefully people were spiritually fed in those churches and now they're just being physically fed. But without a spirit, I can tell you this from my example that in Baltimore there is a church that was converted into a bar. And what's even interesting to me is that at one point we were invited with our food truck to go and serve food at that bar. And it was just my way of perhaps keeping it rooted in its tradition, a Catholic priest with a food truck serving good food. We were no longer invited to that because apparently one of the managers didn't think that we were woke enough to serve food there. They basically accused me of not being, um, compassionate to different races, even though my entire food truck staff is of a different race. They called me, anti-gay or homophobic, which is hardly the case because if they knew some of our staff members, they would realize that that wasn't an issue when it comes to food. And it's really sad that whatever traces of Catholicism could be manifested there with my food truck, they chose to get rid of it completely altogether. But there's another famous one, and it's really a shocker. And I'm going to just show you this video of it. It is a video of uh, a convent, the Visitation Convent in Frederick, Maryland, which was eventually turned into a hotel resort, and the chapel itself was turned into a bar. This is the image. Check this out. That's actually me taking that video because I had a chance to actually visit the place there. And I saw the restaurant. The head chef of the restaurant, the owner, is Chef Brian Voltaggio, very incredibly talented chef, just a good man in general too. And there's been a lot of backlash because of the fact that this once was a chapel for nuns is now a bar. And people are upset about that. But you have to know a couple things, and here's where I want to share some thoughts, and this might help provide some pastoral perspective for you. Number one, if the Catholic Church gives up the church building and it is no longer a church, it is called deconsecrated. That means it's just a building. There is no spiritual significance other than maybe some spiritual memories of the place. And yes, it was a place where we commemorated the Lord's passion and resurrection, and the holy sacrifice of the Mass was celebrated there, as well as countless other sacraments. The building itself is deconsecrated. It means it's no longer reserved for that. Can there be spiritual connection to it? Yes. The challenge in the case of the Visitation Convent is that the sisters were supposed to take away all of the religious objects from those places. But, this is a group of older nuns. There are probably so few of them now. What are they going to do with it all? Where do they put it? So they just kind of left it. The developers found this building and saw that it was a worthy building, and it's a truly worthy building. It was at a time when there were hundreds of religious sisters there. They were all now converted into bedrooms for the hotel. And the bar was originally the convent, and they left the main altar there, the high altar, with the statues and all. You see it in the pictures. And it's such a beautiful thing that the developers turned it into kind of a centerpiece for the bar. And it really caused great controversy. But is that wrong? Well, it's going to always feel wrong because those religious objects are to be used for religious things. But if it is deconsecrated, then it's just basically a table that is decorated with religious looking things. The problem is that the developer should have probably not used it exactly the way it was when it was an altar, because it can feel sacrilegious. And some will argue that it is. I'm not here to say one way or the other. I can just acknowledge that it feels weird. But the people ultimately responsible were the sisters of the Visitation Order, because they were supposed to remove everything and just leave an empty shell, so that there could be no opportunity to use something that was once used for religious goods and religious services for now something so profane or something so mundane as drinking alcohol without any religious connotation. So it becomes very challenging. So, how are we supposed to deal with it? Number one, it's to see this building as a home, but it's temporary. It's not heaven. In other words, the building itself can have great meaning to you personally, but it's only a temporary home. It's not heaven. So while you might gain some heavenly insight in this spiritual home for the moment, it doesn't belong to you. So while you can take ownership of it, you are not the owner of it. Now, I say this because my mom and dad have felt the exact same thing. My parents moved to the United States, immigrated here legally, of course, waited many years for our green card to come through. And then, of course, we didn't do anything because we were following the law until we became citizens and now with our passport. But long story short, my mom wanted to move to an area where she could walk to the church because, like in her Philippine village, she was literally a block away. We moved literally a block away from the Catholic Church, which was at one point St. Rose of Lima. Now it's completely abandoned. My mom and dad would go to church there every day and walk there. Okay, sometimes they drove there a block, but I can understand why. But it is now no longer a functioning church, and it really is sad. And I have to tell this to my parents too, that while you can take ownership of the building, you are not owners of the building. And I think we have to always recognize gratitude for the experiences we have there because nothing on this side of heaven will last forever, including those buildings that were once beautiful. Buildings in a community that served many people. Now they're gone or they're empty and abandoned. So we've got to be grateful for the good that God was able to do in those buildings, but also, and this is where I just really want to encourage many Catholics, be grateful that you have the opportunity to go to another church nearby. There are many places in America and even in our world where the Catholic Church is many, many, many miles away, and you have to drive great lengths or walk for hours to get to a Catholic church. And so we should never feel entitled to owning a building, but rather kind of take blame for ourselves. If the church is empty, is it because we didn't show up and evangelize and help bring others to the faith? And if it was out of our control, then it's out of our control. But what can we do about it? Well, number one, do what some people have done and bring new life to the parish. And if you can't bring new life to the parish, I'm going to end with that story, is at least make sure that you're a custodian of all the religious goods in it. Give you an example of that. When I was a parish priest, we built a new church, big, beautiful church, seats 1,200 people, very classic design, tabernacle in the center, just incredibly beautiful church. And the Stations of the Cross that were in the previous iteration of a church, which was not very attractive, it has since been turned into a hall. But the Stations of the Cross in the former hall just would get lost in this massive church. Interestingly enough, a family who is a longtime family of this community actually had the original Stations of the Cross. They were the custodians of it, and they kept it in their barn shed for many years. And they said, how long are we going to keep this? And the answer was, until the church asks for it back. And indeed, we did. And it was just an amazing kind of piece of history to reclaim that patrimony of the original church. So the original church was beautiful, obviously torn down to make room for another church, modern, ugly, returned to a more classic design. We needed Stations of the Cross. We used the originals. And it was because a good family in the neighborhood claimed it, didn't sell it on eBay, but they kept it, and their mentality was, we're going to be custodians for as long as we can or until the church asks for it back. That's ownership without being owners of it. And here's another great story too, and it's true, There was a church that was set to shut down, and a pastor was sent there to close it down. And his mentality was, I'm not going to send this church unless we put up go down fighting, so to speak. So we started opening the church up to more just spiritual activities, youth group, concerts, prayer opportunities, spiritual exercises. And people started to come to the point where it became a little bit more alive again. Somebody noticed that the church was being used and wanted to make a donation to the church. And what did this priest do? He built a fountain in front of the church. Now, it could have been used for something else, but no, he created something beautiful in front of the church, and it became a focal point for the neighborhood where people would come together. It would be a meeting place, which is exactly what the churches were intended to be in the first place. And now the church, which was originally set to close, is one of the busier churches in this particular diocese. Yup, it can happen. What we've got to do is remember, the church is not limited, but concretized to our expression of faith. It's not limiting our faith to just the four walls, but it's a concrete, visible, tangible sign of a place that we call our spiritual home, knowing that homes can sometimes be abandoned and sometimes be taken away and even destroyed. And that's why we have to approach church the same way we approach our own home. Take ownership of it, even if we know that we can own nothing in heaven. Your church is supposed to bring you to heaven. And I hope that this helps to give you perspective when I know there's a lot of church closures right now. What are we to do about it? Hopefully this can give you a perspective. Please make sure you like, subscribe, share, and comment. Let me know what your thoughts are. If you had a church that closed down, how are you dealing with it? And please continue to support us, because without your support, we can't have a show like this where we're dishing out faith, culture, and commentary. So visit patreon.com/The Father Leo Show. Support us at any level, giving you access to great content and some special perks. Once again, I hope that this helps give perspective to a painful reality, but knowing that eventually our church in heaven is our ultimate home. God bless you, and stay hungry for God.